for the prompt here. Okay. My prompt says we're live, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the Joint Fiscal Committee. I believe this is the last meeting of this Joint Fiscal Committee.
We have one
It's
this
been a
afternoon.
regular morning meeting. First item on the agenda is the minutes of December 15th and the minutes of December 21st. They're down as two action items. I think we can do them at one. Is there any questions, omissions, deletions, changes?
I'll move the minutes.
Both days. Okay.
Yes.
Senator Westman has moved that we approve the December 15th and December 21st minutes. Have I got a second?
Second.
I think I heard Senator Kitchell. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, I hear no no's, so they are approved. We are then on to the second item, which is the reallocation request of 1.5 million to the Secretary of State's office to provide grants to offset non-budgeted additional costs to municipalities to produce and mail out annual town meeting, municipal and school budget Australian ballots to all active registered voters. And I've got Adam on the agenda. Adam.
He's there.
I am
We're
here.
there you are. Okay, but the Secretary of State and Deputy Secretary are also with us. So Adam, the floor is yours.
Oh, terrific. Thank you, Madam Chair. As is typical in these meetings, as the committee may remember, I bring with me some influential friends. My colleague in the Agency of Administration, Secretary Young, is with me to describe our request in front of the committee, and Secretary Kondos is here, who can answer any question on details and how the money that we are requesting will be spent. So I thank them for joining.
I
But
think this
pardon me?
is in response to laws, rule changes. I think we have all been told are going to be in process from the Government Operations Committee the first 2 weeks of the session, or the first full week, to get on the governor's decks, which would allow towns to change their voting system, change all kinds of things to allow town meeting in response to COVID. So, and this would be the funding if and when that passes. And Representative Ansel.
So I'm fully in support of this proposal, this recommendation. But before we go too far with it, at some point I would like to do what I think Adam started to do, which was to give us an update on the CRF money, so that we know sort of what the status is and where the money's coming from. So I'm not
And that was
I'm not in any
requested.
way having reservations about this. I just don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
Okay. Adam, is that what you were about to do, or were you kind of punting the ball to the next square, Secretary?
that was what I was all prepared to launch into.
Okay,
So,
so we will start
do,
with that.
I sent to the committee yesterday a spreadsheet that lays this out. And I believe
Set up.
there it is. Magically, it appeared.
Yes.
So the committee will recall, hopefully, that when we last met on, I believe, December 21st, we were showing a little over $9 million on the bottom line of unallocated money for the Coronavirus Relief Fund. The committee at the December 21st meeting approved a little over 3.18 million of requests, which you see there, including the auditor and AOT and ADS and the like. So that brought us down to a available amount of $6.426 million. And subsequent to that meeting, there's been some movement within the fund, notably the Vermont State Colleges, which had originally reported to us available amount, contacted us and said that in fact, that money they would be able to use, so that we are not reporting as available any longer. So that we deduct from the 6.4 million. In addition, two small reversions came back to us. One from the $10 million appropriation to the Agency of Administration for Independent Colleges. That specific reversion, I believe, is Goddard College that told us that they did not need the COVID money for use. So they reverted that back to the fund as well. There was a couple of small reversions from two state departments, BGS and Fish and Wildlife, that had COVID eligible payroll expenses set aside that they have reported to us they do not need. So the net of it is just a hair over $6 million that is available. And it is from that availability that we hope to fund this request before the committee today. Are there questions on that?
Representative Ansel.
Yes, ma'am.
It may not be in connection with this motion, but I'm curious what, I'm thinking particularly of the 14 million that we heard about that was available for K-12, and it doesn't show up in here. So I assume it's somewhere else. Is that information that you have to share with us? And
So-
is there other money like that? I assume that there is.
Yes, there is. And, you know, I want to be clear that we, as the committee is well aware, the federal government granted an extension on the use of CRF money. Prior to knowing about that extension, we were prepared to revert money back to the fund that could not be used by December 30th. That included the allocation to K through 12. There was approximately a little under $15 million. That included other allocations as well. There was, you know, I would say a half a dozen reasonable size reversions. We have not done that. After the extension was granted, we thought it would be a good idea to take stock of where we were to see which departments, including AOE or the K through 12 system, could use that money. So this purposefully is just the money that has already been on the bottom line. You know, this money has been unallocated for several weeks. It is still unallocated, and it is purposeful that we are taking this request from that pool, and we have not touched other money that may or may not be available due to the new guidelines from Washington.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions? And I can only see 3 people. Okay, there we go. Senator Ash.
Thanks, Adam. I'm just, maybe I got a little confused there. Can you just say where, I'll use 14 million for shorthand, just following on Representative Ansel. Where would someone know of the existence of that 14 million, which may be available for other purposes?
That is with the department. Actually, in the spreadsheet that I sent to you, there was another tab that has in very minute detail what each appropriation was and what is available from those appropriations. So that would be in the AOE, or not in the AOE, in the PK through 12 education tab. So there was an $82 million original grant. There was 4 million that was transferred, leaving 78 million. And it's that pool of money where that $14, $15 million sits. We did not single it out from the larger pool because we're not sure that it is available or not. So it just sits in that appropriation.
So this 6 million represents what is known to be freed up at this time.
That's
though it's
correct.
unlikely to be all of it once it's all said and done. Is that the,
That is correct.
okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
Okay, Representative Toll, and then I see.
Thank you, Senator
Representative-
Cummings. I'm just following up on a chat on our screen that Secretary Young has asked to be unmuted, and I don't know if anyone is seeing that. And I just want to bring that to your attention, that she's asking to speak, but can't unmute herself.
Here we go.
I'm seeing her as unmuted, but I can't
Now
hear
she
her.
is. She's going to call.
Okay, she's going to call in. Okay. All right, I think we've had that problem before. Representative Lippert.
Yes, thank you. This is a question for Adam. So help me understand what the status is for agencies of state government which have been making sub-grants with CRF dollars to community organizations who, of course, everyone was facing the December 30th deadline. I'm thinking in particular, as an example, of the health department, which had health disparities sub-grants to a variety of community organizations. Are those community organizations, with the extension of the December 30th deadline, are they now free to continue to expend the dollars as they had hoped to, regardless of if they're able to in an appropriate way, as outlined, are they continuing to be able to expend those dollars as sub-granted from various agencies of state government to community nonprofits and organizations?
Right. So as the committee is aware, it was December 27th when the president signed this bill.
Right.
Subsequent to that, we asked departments to let us know their status. We had already asked them to give us a report on the last day of the year, December 31st, about what the status of their appropriations were. We received probably 24 responses. Some agencies said that they'd used up all their money. There were 3 of those. Other agencies said that they still had money available, but they asked to, and this would be applicable to what you've asked, Representative Lippert, they've asked to continue to spend because they see the ability to get the money out, although they didn't see it prior to December 30th, but now that they have more time, they've asked to keep their allocations. We got a couple of requests for additional money. We also got a couple of requests to reverse reversion. So literally all over the map. The agencies that still had money left over that prior to the change in rules would have reverted now still have their money, and many of them will continue to do what they've been doing before. We're trying to reach out to everyone and develop a kind of a unified policy on how we will go about those remaining balances in the funds. But we have not told any state government agency or frankly any component unit to stop doing what they're doing. So I guess what I would say is it remains status quo.
Thank you. Can I make one last request or suggestion? Because this, as we say, hopefully or likely is our very last meeting as the Joint Fiscal Committee, and now the committees of the legislature appropriately will take responsibility for taking this further. I would hope that there might be some communication to this committee as well about what the next steps are in the accounting for the CRF dollars that we've been trying to follow and been working with carefully for many months now. So I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but I would certainly appreciate that, being one of the members who does not serve on one of the either the appropriations committees or the tax writing committees. Thank you.
Understood.
Representative Ansel.
Thank you. So I want to follow up a little bit on Bill's question, but I want to ask it specifically with K-12. If do you have information that would answer the question that we're getting from some of our school districts? Is that money still available to them if they had legitimate, expenses, but they don't get them reimbursed because of what we thought was the deadline? Is there a possibility that they can access that $14+ million? I mean, I realize that it's possible, but I think you've described that, but is it going to happen?
I'm not the best person to answer that. I know that the money, we have not reverted the money, so the money is there. But I would yield to the Agency of Education for a better answer on that. I'm afraid I'm not the best person to answer that.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Senator Kitchell.
Just to follow up on, I know that we've been concerned about the CRF money to schools, but the other thing that has happened in addition to giving the extension, the federal bill does put another $127 million specifically into the K through 12 system. So I think part of this discussion is really understanding the interplay between multiple funding sources, because I think we're all concerned about the letter that went out with the property tax rate increase and how that can be somewhat mitigated. But it does seem like at least in the second round of relief funding, there was money specifically designated for K through 12, which seems to come with quite a bit of flexibility as well. So to me, it's something we really have to look at. We have to understand it, and we have to understand how the two come together. So I think I would assume that the Agency of Education and Finance and Management will be looking at that. But our concern always has been that property tax pressure that is confronting us at this point.
And I don't know if Secretary Young is on the phone, but I know that.
Yeah, no, Secretary Young has her hand up and maybe she can,
Oh, okay.
I think
know
she's
one of the
on the
things that
phone
she
and
would
on
say.
video, so, because she's muted on video.
I'm just
Okay.
hoping you can hear me on the phone.
I can hear you, yes.
Well, I would just like to address Senator Kitchell's comment, and she's like absolutely right. I just got off an hour call. We have a lot of digging to do into the new federal stimulus, and we are focusing right now on those areas where there could be overlap, whether there's retroactivity, whether there is new money that we've already spent CRF dollars on, and we could trade out those CRF dollars with new money because there's retroactivity. It's going to be, I believe, unfortunately, it's just going to be a long few months of reconciling yet again what we've just closed out basically on the CRF front, and reopening up maybe some of those grants made through CRF to see if that can be offset with additional new money. And that's pretty oversimplified, but we're also waiting for guidance from every federal agency that's administering these new tranches of money from the new bill. And it doesn't appear like there's a lot of discretion for the administration or the legislature within there. But if we can successfully and legally and retroactively free up some CRF, we might have more options. So there is a lot to unravel here, Senator Kitchell, and we'll be looking forward to working with the appropriation committees on that in the Joint Fiscal Office.
Okay. Representative Ansel. Representative Ansel?
Oh, thank you. Couldn't hear you. It's good news that there is additional money for sure, and I understand that this is incredibly complex. But the one comment think we need to, the one thing we need to remember is that school boards are preparing their budgets right now. That many of them are preparing warnings right now. And the votes for some of them are going to be in March. And so the timing is problematic from where they sit as well. So it's, if we had all the time in the world, it would be great, but their year proceeds in a very tight time frame. So thanks.
Okay. Any further discussion, questions on this issue? Okay, then I'm going back to the agenda and the reallocation of the 1.5 million. I am not sure who is going to take the lead. I've lost Secretary nope, he's up at the top now. Secretary Condos, do you want to have a word on this, or?
I actually think Suzanne was going to lead this to start
Okay.
this discussion
All
off.
right, so Suzanne?
Okay, thank you very much. So as some of the members of this committee who also serve on appropriations and government operations committees of any, the administration had put in one iteration of the budgets last session, a waterfall proposal that was contingent upon Congress providing more time for the expenditure of CRF dollars. And we had asked for the legislature to consider some money and appropriation should there be an extension of time to extend into the March town and school district meetings for money to pay for additional printing and copying that may arise as a result of school boards deciding to move totally to the Australian ballot system. You also may recall that the legislature passed 2 provisions of law that did allow the legislative bodies, without a vote of the electorate, to unilaterally decide to move to the Australian ballot system in both the town meeting and the school district meetings in this coming March timeframe. So basically, this request is renewing that request now that we do know we can spend CRF dollars beyond December 31st into this period of time, and asking again that the committee consider allocating that 1.5 million for this purpose. And I think, regardless of whether there's any new policy adopted by the legislature over the next 2 weeks, there is this existing authority for the towns to move completely to Australian ballot because of COVID-19, and they may indeed incur additional printing and mailing expenses, regardless of what additional action may be taken in the next 2 to 3 weeks by the legislature on this issue.
Okay. Questions, Senator Kitchell?
Well, I'll move approval of the 1.5 million request. Then we can have more discussion.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
Senator Kitchell has moved and Senator Westman is second that we approve the reallocation of 1.5 million to the Secretary of State's office to cover the cost of town meeting, additional printing and mailing. Discussion. Senator Ash.
Thanks. I think, I'm not sure if this is a question for Suzanne or for the Secretary of State. I guess it's sort of twofold. One is the timeframes for questions like the school budget or, other things that have to be noticed to the voters of a town. That's obviously fast approaching, just weeks away. The pandemic is, we have positive news, but it's unlikely that it's going to be encouraged for unlimited groups of people to come together on town meeting day. So I guess the question is there a process for requiring Australian ballot for town meeting day? Who has that authority if it exists? And then is the 1.5 million sufficient to cover every community if they went to Australian ballot, including if, as the memo says, the school and the municipality were not aligned?
Want me to take that, Suzanne?
Be my guest, Secretary.
All right, so that's a great question, Tim. The 1.5 million is actually an estimate on our part. This is what it cost us to mail out 440,000 ballots and return, and it was really just the postage itself. What's actually come to light in literally the last few days has been that you've got solid waste districts out there, you've got water sewer districts out there. They're all considered municipalities, as well as school districts, which cross town lines. There's districts that include several towns or many towns, and if those towns do not align their votes together, we could fast use that money up and not have enough just to cover postage alone. And to further a further point that I want to make is that the language that has been existing has all been enabling language. There is nothing that requires any town to go to Australian ballot. Nothing requires any town to go to vote by mail. In fact, right now, a town could not go to vote by mail except for existing statute for no excuse absentee. But the actual mailing to every resident is technically not in statute right now. And that is, what we're hoping in the next literally 2 weeks is to have the legislature move a bill that would allow towns to move their town meeting further out, that would authorize or enable if they wish to use vote by mail. And it would also authorize the Secretary of State to, like I did in the previous election, to have the authority to make some on the spot changes as we go, to be able to keep up with. If we all of a sudden see a surge that's going the wrong way, we may want to take some different actions. So there's nothing finite in this, but I can tell you that if you were to look at everybody talks about town meeting day being March 2nd, but the first deadline coming up is January 14th, when anybody that wants to put an article on a petition, with a petition onto the ballot, must file by that deadline. Candidates must file by January 25th. The warning must be filed by January 31st, and ballots must be prepared by February 10th for the March 2nd town meeting, if that's the way it goes. But we've already heard from one solid waste district, I believe it was up in the Northeast Kingdom, which has like 40 towns in it. And they said that, there's no way they could align themselves with a vote of the towns, because the towns are in different time frames. We would certainly encourage, and we hope that the legislature and the governor will encourage towns and school districts and other municipal districts to try to align their votes together, because this 1.5 wouldn't last very long otherwise. So having said that, under normal situations, we believe that the 1.5 will cover the vast majority, if not all of the concerns. But if every town were to shift to it, we would have far more than 440,000 ballots, and that would be required. And you have tabulator towns versus hand count towns. Hand count towns can actually print a ballot off on their copier. It doesn't have to require a specific paper, but if you go to a tabulator town, and we've already heard from several tabulator towns that use their tabulators for the general election and primary, but not for town meeting, that they are planning to use their tabulator for this. That's an additional cost of $1,200 to $1,500 for the memory card for it. And then you also have the ballots themselves have to be printed on cardstock. And in order to be read by the tabulators, by the scanners, they have to be professionally printed. It's not something they can just run through their copy machine.
So thank you for that comprehensive sort of lay of the land. So in light of how close we are to mid-January and the first of those deadlines you described, I guess my question, I'll start back at the beginning. The authority that was given first to you and the governor and then just to you to make alterations to the way elections are conducted, has that expired at the end of the calendar year?
Yes.
So at this point, the Secretary of State's office can't just say that they must be Australian ballots.
We revert back to Title 17 at this point.
Okay. And is that something, if the legislature passes that in the first week or two, is that something that the Secretary of State's office is planning on doing? I'm just imagining a scenario where you have two town meeting communities. The governor still has in place as part of the emergency orders that you can't spend time with more than one household. I don't know how town meeting can, actually go forward if you don't have Australian ballots at that point. So I'm just curious at this point, what would be the argument not to require all communities to go to Australian ballots in light of what we will know 2 weeks from now, that we're not to hang out with people outside of our household or just one other household? How can communities have to deal with that timing issue of having to set in motion a number of steps with a town meeting that seems impossible to convene safely at this point?
Again, that's the crux of this, and our intention would be to literally, what we're expecting, Senator Ash, is that starting Monday next week or Tuesday, that the House and Senate GovOps will take up some legislation, as I described, and literally they have through the end of the second week to get that legislation to the governor's desk. During that time period, we will be already preparing a election directive that we may or may not issue, depending on what it is, but we want to be ready to turn that around immediately. And I do want to say, Senator, that we've worked very closely with the administration on this. This has been something that we approached in a collaborative way to try to figure out how we can encourage more towns to go in this direction. But there's nothing that says I can't do that at this point. I think that would probably require a piece of legislation from the legislature, and we deliberately are trying to keep this piece of legislation to a minimum to try to be able to move it as quickly as possible. And the reason that there's no money in the legislation is to avoid having, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but to avoid having to slow the process down because it has to go through appropriations. The idea is that if this money is available, we could have this money available outside of that process and just deal with the authorizations that are necessary. So that's the approach that we've taken.
If I might ask one last question, as I look at my own community, which on Monday night was doing somersaults, trying to figure out how to get everything rushed in time to meet all of the normal deadlines, because they either don't, I think some of the counselors didn't know, or can't count on what the legislation might do because you can't count on it yet. I'm just wondering if there was an intent to require Australian ballots, that would be something that I think communities would best hear now, so that they wouldn't make a series of decisions, which might be regrettable if they knew they were going to have a little more time. If the answer is that the Secretary of State's office isn't ready to make that kind of decision, then I totally respect that. If it was planning on doing that, it would seem best to communicate it as quickly as possible so that all of these government entities are, cool-headed as they make decisions rather than trying to rush for an artificial deadline.
Well, and that's why the very first item on that, in that legislation, is to allow towns to move their town meeting days or their annual meetings out a month, 2 months. Obviously, they have to get it done before the new fiscal year, but to try to get it out away from the March 2nd. Could it be April 2nd or May 2nd? We don't know, but I think that that's a possibility, and I think again. I don't mean to interrupt, but just to cut to the chase from my point of view. For November, it was decided that it was the safest thing to do was to send a ballot to every person. And circumstances as we see them today, while there's a hope as we look forward, it's still pretty bad. And I know that a law would have to pass to authorize either you or someone else to require Australian ballots, but being permissive of it is different than having a standard that every community is meeting. And I'm just wondering what's different now from back in September when you required all communities to use mail ballots. Well, first off, we were doing this as a centralized mailing, and that is not the case at this point. This would be a town by town mailing. So any town would have to, and I think larger towns such as the city of Burlington, perhaps Rutland or Bennington, that they may choose to have a contract with a mailing house to mail their ballots. But I think the vast majority of towns would probably handle it on their own, putting a stamp on envelopes that would require a ton of volunteers to help them. But I think we don't have the luxury of time right now, Senator. And I think that's really the issue that we have right now is we literally, deadlines start hitting us 2 weeks from now. And in fact, less than 10 days from now. And we don't have that luxury to actually have the time to set up a system for a direct mail of a ballot from each of the 246 towns. I don't know how many, 60 or 70 school districts. All these things have to be taken into account. So I don't know. I can't answer your question, and I think that's the reason why the House and Senate GovOps committees and meetings that we had in December were talking about enabling legislation to let the towns make the decisions what they need to do.
Okay, thanks.
I am seeing yellow, not blue hands today. So I don't know if something's gone with my color blindness or the system's changed, and I can't put the yellow hands down, and I can put down the blue hands. So I see Senator Kitchell, Representative Ansel, and Senator Sears in that order. And then Secretary Young, did you have your hand up or?
I did, but I can certainly wait.
Okay, I was just wondering if you had something to fill in from the last conversation.
I think just to respond briefly to the question about what's changed, and to speak to the intent here, as Secretary Kondos stated, was to have the money issue resolved, and this seems to be the most efficient, fastest way to make sure that there's money set aside regardless of the policy decision made over the next 2 weeks. And I think what has changed between the approach that's being contemplated by the GovOps committees now, and that is basically the data and the state of where we are in the pandemic, And there may indeed, Senator Ash, be some, different thinking on that as the numbers post-holiday come out. And just say, as of January 3, what's changed is that our 7-day, average is at 108 cases. And today alone, I saw the count from yesterday was at 168. Our positivity rates, are going up as well, up to 2.62%. And finally, we have a more contagious strain of the virus that's been discovered in the United States. And from one report I read last night is, coming our way and is in New York. So I think the policy committees, will have some additional data and science around the decision making. The next report's coming out at 11 today. And, if the trends continue, they may indeed decide the best thing to do is to just mandate it as a public health, measure. So I just throw that out there, that we all have to be very fluid in our thinking around this and base it on what's going on in the pandemic and the trends.
I think the thing that I'm hearing, though, is that if everybody, all municipalities, we forget public utility districts or committees, if they can't coordinate, we don't have enough money to mail out the ballots. Is that okay? I see Secretary Kondos is shaking his head yes. So I'm assuming that might go through the appropriations or some process if that comes to pass. So I'm going to go to Senator Kitchell.
Well, I just want to follow up on that discussion. And that is, if we think based on what we're hearing is that we're running very tight on the 1.5, one option would be to amend the original motion and move it to an amount up to, and that would perhaps give surety that we can, I don't even know if that's a word, assurance, to that the expenditure, that the funding is adequate to cover the expenditures. So one option, if you could, if you feel that 1.5 is really being perhaps a little on the low side, is to move it to say, I don't know, 2 million. I don't know what's reasonable, but that I would be willing to amend my motion in light of the conversation that we've just had about the unknowns, the difficulty of aligning votes. I know that in my little town, I'm part of the Northeast Kingdom Waste Management, which I assume is that 40 town district. And so my question back to, I guess, Adam and the Secretary of State, if we're going to do it, we believe it's possible in light of the information we have now about the severity of the pandemic. Should we not take this opportunity and address what we think is going to be the probability of needing more money? That's really the question that is emerging from this discussion.
And I think, though, that we cannot amend the motion. It has to come from the administration.
Right.
They can amend the motion, I think.
That's right. I'm sorry. I'm getting a text too. We can't do anything other than approve or disapprove. So I guess my question would be back to Secretary Young about would it be fiscally prudent to relook at that 1.5 in light of all the information that's come out in terms of the number of municipalities that would be involved in the vote?
Thank you, Senator Kitchell. We have been relying on estimates from the Secretary of State, and if Secretary Kondos believes that the up to $2 million will provide us the space we need, I would propose that our proposal be revised to be up to $2 million. So I think we need to hear from Secretary Condos if he thinks the up to 2 million will give us the space we need.
Well, I would say the 2 million, up to 2 million would be better. I mean, obviously, any money that's not expended would go back to you folks to deal with. But we're not going to know literally until probably June or even July whether the money has been spent or not. And it may, even using 2 million might limit the amount of reimbursement we might do. In other words, we've talked about, and I think it's in the document that you have, the letter, the cover letter from the administration. We talked about having the ability to pay for postage. Well, you got postage going out, postage coming back. We've already taken care of the envelopes. We've already done that. But you have the cost of ballots for those towns that are currently floor towns that are now moving to Australian ballot. That's a new cost for them. So you got the printing, and if they use a tabulator, there's additional costs there. And essentially what we were planning to do, since we did this before, is to have like an Excel spreadsheet with all the different columns for the different types of expenses. And we would keep a running total as it's coming in. And before we actually issue any reimbursement checks, we would actually go through to make sure we have enough money to do it. You know, I can't, this is new ground here, because our office does not administrate local elections. We don't know what their costs are. We have no ability to know, or the ability to audit their costs. We have to trust what they're doing. That's really what it comes down to, is trust with the municipalities. But for instance, Senator Kitchell, the solid waste district manager or general manager reported that it would be, I think it was somewhere like $45,000 to $50,000 cost just for their district if they had to send out a ballot to all 46 towns. So that's just one district. You've got all the other solid waste districts. If they don't align their votes, then they have to do a separate election. You want the elections to be lined up so that the election falls on the same day as for every town. So if your towns have different town meeting days, these are all factors that enter into this puzzle, and this is not an easy solution. And you know, we know that the initial expense, the biggest expense, is postage, and then printing of the ballots would come second. And those are the things that we were going to prioritize, and then we would look at other things. I mean, in the general election and the primary, we also used our federal CARES election money to purchase drop boxes. So we have 175 towns that have drop boxes already. You know, those don't have to be repurchased. Many of those towns will probably use them again, but you know, we can't, and this is all based on whether they do this on their own or not. I mean, whether they decide to do it. You know, all I can say is that 2 million would certainly be more helpful, but I can't guarantee you that 2 million is going to cover it.
I think though, going forward, if the 1.5 or 2 million will get us through the towns that are staying on the regular town meeting day. If others move it, I've got one town that already is in May. For a while, Montpelier was in May. If other towns move to May, then either joint fiscal or the appropriations committee would have the ability to come up with additional funds. But it seems like the initial challenge is to get us through those that decide to do Australian ballot on town meeting, the traditional day, which has the deadlines, and then see how many move the deadlines and we've got some CRF on the bottom line. There's more out there. I don't know if we can use it for this, but this isn't an all or nothing, I don't think. I stand to be corrected at that. Senator Sears, I got your note that said you had to,
Yeah, I had another meeting at 10 that I pushed back till 10:30, but I couldn't push it any further. I just wanted to say that I will support whatever the committee does. I won't be here to vote on it, obviously. I thought we'd be finished in 2 hours, in 1 hour, but obviously that didn't
Two.
happen. Yeah, probably 2 now. But I thank you, Secretary Condos. Wanted to congratulate you, but I hope that whatever we come together on will recognize all the differences, what you were just talking about. I vote in 3 different jurisdictions. One is the town of Bennington. The second is the village of North Bennington, and then an independent school district in North Bennington. So it gets a little complex when we're trying to mail out all these ballots. So I can see how it would easily go well beyond that. But I did want to, because this is our last meeting of this Joint Fiscal Committee, thank Representative Toll and Senator Ash for their service on this committee. It's been a pleasure to be with you both, and I wish you both well in the future. So with that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Representative Ansel.
Thank you. I had a couple questions, and I was also going to talk about the issue that Senator Kitchell brought up about the adequacy of the money, and with a special concern about, if this bill goes through with money on it, then of course it slows down. So I don't know if the right figure is 2 million or what it is, but I would certainly support increasing it. The questions I've got have to do with, we've been using the terms Australian ballot and mail-in ballot sort of interchangeably, and I'm not sure they are different. And I was wondering whether, which it is that we're being asked to, we will be asked to authorize in January. And the fact that a town goes to Australian ballot doesn't mean that they're going to mail it to every voter necessarily. So just want some clarification about that. And then the other question has to do with the deadlines. If a town, if I'll look at my select board in Calais, for example, so we have a floor town meeting, do floor votes. If they decide, and I don't know what they're planning to do, but if they decided to push the town meeting date to May, for example, does that change all the other deadlines? Is that automatic? Do they just backdate from the date that the meeting is set? So the January 19th date, or 14th, I guess it is, for getting things on the morning would no longer apply in that circumstance. Is that how that works? So that's
Yeah,
a couple of questions.
so essentially, there's very few actual dates
Jim,
that
we're
are,
having trouble hearing you.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're faint, but we can hear you.
Senator
I'm not used to not being able to hear you.
Senator Cummings, I've had trouble hearing you, so everybody else is coming through.
It's a quarter of an inch away from my computer microphone, which I think you may be doing what I do and sit back.
Well, I'm sitting about a foot away from my monitor, so.
Now I can hear
In
you.
any case, many of the dates are days before the election, so it backs up. It might say 30 days before the election or 40 days before the election, that kind of thing. So, those, and that's the way it should be. It should not be, it'll be this date because it changes every year. But that's pretty much the way that goes. As far as the Australian ballot versus vote by mail, vote by mail is basically an Australian ballot that's mailed out to someone. And I think there's a difference when we speak about Australian ballot. It's the difference of town meeting where you might have a piece of paper that you write your answer, yes or no. That's different from, that's just a ballot, versus an Australian ballot is a pre-printed ballot that goes out.
I guess my question is, so if we have an Australian ballot, it's pre-printed, but typically you go into the town meeting and you vote there. That's how a couple of my towns do it. That doesn't normally require or involve people being mailed ballots. So when you use the term Australian ballot, are you assuming that that the towns will actually mail them to the voters?
No. An
No.
Australian ballot means that it's just a ballot that's pre-printed for people to fill out. They could absentee ballot it, whatever. It's not a direct mail ballot to all people.
So are we contemplating, is that what the legislation is contemplating, that towns, that you could decide that they would all be mailed to voters?
No, it wouldn't be us that would decide that. It would be each individual town would
It would be
be
each
enabled to go to a
voting
vote by
entity.
mail.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I think I understand.
I'm seeing Senator Ash.
Yeah, I guess I'll just, I appreciated everything the Secretary of State has said and how complex the whole situation is and the unique circumstances, not just from town to town, but also, you know, solid waste districts and whatever. I do think that there should be consideration very quickly about across the board guidance on whether to hold in-person town meeting, which I can't see there being a safe way to do at this time. And with what information we have, it's only 7 weeks away or so. And all the guidance, because you can't turn someone away from town meeting, most of the spaces, while somewhat cavernous, still would have restrictions on the number of people who could be in at any one time. So I don't see why there isn't at least statewide guidance forthcoming about whether or not those can even occur, and if so, the manner in which they must occur in order to have safety across the board. There are some things during a global health crisis that probably shouldn't be left to individual select boards to decide, especially when people want to hold some of these customs, even in the face of what might be insurmountable odds. So I'm glad that we're hopefully going to receive a revised request in a few minutes with the up to language. I think that's very good. But I still think that this is going to get really confusing for a lot of people across the state very quickly if we have hundreds of unique boards making different determinations about whether it's safe to go forward with the customary town meetings.
That would get dealt with in the bills that are
No,
billed.
the legislation, as I understand it, would be permissive to take different steps, but wouldn't require a community to do anything different than it always has, as long as, I guess, it's complying with the executive order. And that's precisely my question. If complying with the order that's in place at the time makes it impossible to hold town meeting, but the community hasn't already made other plans, I don't, it's not clear what happens then.
Okay.
I think that's a discussion that would have to be held with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, with the administration. That's not a decision that I would want to make as Secretary of State, to order all towns to either move their date or to go to vote by mail. I think at this point in time, you have to rely, I think this would be a discussion that we have to have, and Suzanne, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is a discussion that would have to be had between the administration, myself, Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and the legislature.
Well, can I jump in? And the school boards. Please don't forget the schools.
You're right. I mean,
They're
well, then you get the
critical-
solid waste
critical
districts,
players
you got
here.
all these different municipalities that are out there.
I agree entirely with all of that, Jim. I guess what I would encourage is for that to happen. And I understand it's the diffuse responsibility to make these particular local decisions, but it may be that, I mean, I haven't heard about many communities who are actively planning for delaying. Maybe there are some, but it just seems that the sooner those discussions happen, if there is a solution that works, more broadly, the sooner people have arrived at it, the better. And it could be accommodated in legislation if there was something that seemed to work for all the different groups that you've just described.
Okay, I saw Representative Lippert.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is not a decision that this committee has the authority or the ability to make. It's a debate that needs to take place. As I agree with Senator Ash, it needs to take place immediately. And I know that the House, as I understand it, the Speaker-elect intends to appoint committees on tomorrow afternoon, and that at least the House Government Operations Committee will be convening very shortly thereafter. Is my understanding. So, but this is not, I think what we can do here today, if the administration revises its proposal, is to approve that proposal with an up to an amount. But I think that beyond that, the debate really needs to move to the appropriate legislative committees, along with the governor's office, school districts, et cetera. They have the ability. That's where the ability is to actually have this full debate and make a decision.
I believe I heard Secretary Young revise the request to up to 2 million. Is that correct, Secretary?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, and I heard Senator Kitchell amend her motion. I believe move to.
Second.
And I believe Senator Kitchell said that's what her motion is.
Well, what I did was amend my motion to accept the amended amount allocated to be up to 2 million.
Okay, and Senator Westman has seconded. We are only dealing with money, so any further discussion on the amount of money? All right, then I will ask the secretary to call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Ansel,
Yes.
Senator Ash,
Yes.
Representative Hooper,
Shaking her head, yes. I don't
Shaking
think
head,
we
yes.
can take that.
you
Mary,
are
you're
muted.
muted.
I was trying to unmute. I couldn't get
Okay.
the mouse to respond. Yes.
Thank you. Representative Fagan is yes. Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
Representative Lippert,
Yes.
Senator Sears, Representative Toll,
Yes.
Senator Westman,
Yes.
Senator Sears, absent, Senator Cummings.
Yes.
We are 901.
Okay. So that motion passes. And that can get us on to our final, I hope, agenda item, which is the request to approve the contract for Vermont Medicaid non-emergency transportation services. I have Nisa James first on my list of witnesses, but I'm not.
Senator Cummings,
Yes.
I did a chat, but you didn't see it. So Nissa is not here, but she has the 3 other people that are listed on the agenda that'll help.
Okay.
explain this.
So I
So
think.
Senator Cummings.
Yes,
Yes. Can I provide a little background why this is here?
I believe you're the one that requested to have this on the agenda.
Yes. Back when we were in session, there was concern expressed that the Medicaid non-emergency transportation contract was going out to bid. The way in which Vermont has set up its Medicaid transportation from day one, well, not from day one, but the mid 80s, and I know this because I was involved in how we did it. So was to really use the Medicaid dollars to help bolster our public transportation system and to better integrate the funding that comes from federal transportation, E&D, which is elderly and disabled funding. So it's an example of braided funding before the term came into vogue. And the reason the language was there is because of the fiscal impact it would have if that money moved to a different contractor and the impact it would have on the financial status of our public transit system, which we all know is a key piece of our strategy to reduce in the transportation sector carbon emissions. So the language was there to give us the opportunity to understand if the basis for the decision, and particularly if a decision were made to move that funding or move the service from our public transit network to another provider, which has happened in other states. So that's the reason the language was put in, was to allow us the opportunity to understand the basis for any decision made, and particularly if a decision were made to unbraid, so to speak, the contract and the funding streams that are in place, providing transportation services to people who need access to healthcare services. So that's the background. That's why the language was put in, since no decision on the contract and the bid had been made at the time we were in session. So that's the context for the language requiring the proposed contract to come back to joint fiscal for a final review and approval.
Okay, and Elaine, for no other reason than your screen's lighted, are you going to talk? Who is set to talk to us?
I believe that's Sue Ellen Batiji.
Okay, Sue Ellen just lit up. Okay.
Good
Sue Ellen,
morning.
the floor is yours. Good morning.
Good morning. This is Sue Ellen Batiji. I'm the Director of Provider Member Services at the Department of Vermont Health Access, and my unit oversees the non-emergency transportation contract. So to give you some background, we put this bid out, as Senator Kitchell is aware, in July of this year, July of 2020. Forget we're in a new year. July 2020, we got 2 bids, one from an out-of-state contractor and one from our current contractor, Vermont Public Transit. And we put together a committee to review the RFP, including members of the Agency of Transportation. As Senator Kitchell alluded to, we try to be collaborative with them. And we have granted the contract to Vermont Public Transit Association once again. And I believe you guys have the contract. I think NISA sent it over to you all to review. Couple key things that I think may be helpful for you guys to be aware of is last year alone, VPTA gave out about 265,000 trips to Vermont Medicaid members, and we paid them just under $14 million for the day-to-day trips, with approximately another $12,000 being put out for lodging and meals, as well as hardship miles. The current contract, which is set for January 1 of this year, proposes 15 million, just over 15 million from January 1 to January 1 this year to December 31st of this year, and 15,451,283.34 from January 22 to December 31, 22. And I believe we have met all of the outline of what the statute said. So if there's any questions, I have both Peter McNichol from my unit that oversees the contract and Elaine from VPTA to answer any questions.
Questions? Senator Kitchell, any comments? Does this?
No, you can understand when we're talking about 14 million, the impact that has on supporting another policy goal. And no, I think the explanation, and I thought the grid that was put out and was very succinct and kind of did a good job of presenting the basis for the decision. So On that, I would move approval of the contract.
Do I have a second? I need a
I'll
second.
second it. I'll
Second.
second
Okay,
it.
Senator Westman has seconded. Further discussion? If not, we'll have the clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Ansel,
Yes.
Senator Ash,
Yes.
Representative Hooper,
Yes.
Representative Fagan is yes, Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
Representative Lippert,
Yes.
Senator Sears, Representative Toll,
Yes.
Senator Westman,
Yes.
Senator Sears is absent, and Senator Cummings,
Yes.
901.
Okay, we have approved the contract. So thank you, everyone that's been hanging in here with us for longer than expected.
Well, thank you.
That gets us to the end. I have committee discussions, other, and adjourn as the last item on the agenda. Is there any committee discussion? Okay, I would like to join in thanking the members that are leaving, which is our Representative Toll and Senator Ash. They've been very constructive and hardworking members, especially Representative Toll. The money chairs meet before most of these meetings, and there's a lot of background work and connecting with you that goes on. And Representative Toll has been a great liaison with the rest of the House members, and I appreciate all the work. Same with Senator Ash, who seems to have left us. So with that, I'm going to declare us adjourned